The galaxy had long been under the rule of the Zalrith Dominion, an empire of psionically gifted warlords who ruled with an iron grip. Their fleets spanned thousands of star systems, their technology centuries ahead of most species, and their control over the laws of physics rendered them nearly untouchable. For over 100 years, humanity had been one of the many enslaved races, their world stripped of resources, their people forced into servitude or conscripted as cannon fodder for Zalrith wars. The Zalrith saw humans as little more than an inferior species, useful only in their numbers and adaptability, but never a true threat. That belief was about to be shattered. ####The Hidden Engineer. On the industrial prison world of Vortha, 9, hidden beneath layers of automated sentries and brutal overseers, a human named Elias Voss worked in a weapons foundry. He was a brilliant engineer, once a leading scientist on Earth before his capture. Now, he labored in the shadows of the Zalritha's technological might, forced to assemble weapons for an empire that had annihilated his homeworld's defenses decades ago. Elias had spent the last 3 years planning. He had studied Zalrith technology, understood their weaknesses, and designed something impossible, something the Zalrith would never see coming. The key wasn't brute force. Humanity could never match the Dominion in sheer firepower or numbers. No, the key was innovation. The Zalrith relied on their psionic abilities to bend reality, their ships immune to traditional physics-based attacks. They had never needed to defend against a weapon that could disrupt their very essence. And Elias had built exactly that. ###The impossible weapon. Using stolen components, forbidden knowledge, and the scraps of technology discarded by his overseers, Elias constructed what he called the Singularity Lance. It was a weapon that did not rely on energy or matter but on a fundamental principle the Zalrith had overlooked: quantum instability. The Singularity Lance was designed to create a cascading chain reaction within Zalrith starships, destabilizing the exotic psionic fields that protected them. Theoretically, once the reaction began, it would spread like a virus, consuming any Zalrith vessel it touched. Their entire fleet, their entire empire, was vulnerable to a single shot. But theories meant nothing unless tested. ###The Escape. Elias knew he could never fire the weapon from the prison world, security was too tight. He needed to get off Vortha, 9 and reach the front lines, where a single shot could turn the tide of history. That night, as the 3 blood-red moons of Vortha, 9 rose above the scrapyard of discarded war machines, Elias made his move. The plan was reckless, desperate, but then again, human survival had always thrived on desperation. He overloaded the power grid of the weapons factory, causing a chain reaction of explosions across the entire sector. Alarms blared as Zalrith guards rushed to contain the chaos, their psionic abilities pushing back flames and collapsing buildings. But Elias wasn't running toward freedom, he was running toward the shipyard. Among the scrapyard's wreckage lay a stolen Zalrith scout vessel, one that Elias had spent months subtly repairing. As the Dominion's forces scrambled to respond to the prison riots, he activated the ship's engines, bypassed its security protocols, and blasted off into the dark void of space. ###The chase begins. The moment the ship breached Vortha 9's atmosphere, the Dominion was on him. Automated sentries locked onto his vessel, launching plasma lances and gravitational tethers. Elias dodged and weaved, his hands moving frantically over the controls. He wasn't a pilot, he was an engineer. But humans had always been fast learners. He engaged a short-range warp jump, narrowly avoiding an annihilation beam that would have torn his ship apart. The Dominion's fleet was too vast, too organized, he couldn't run forever. He needed allies. There was only one place to go, the last remnants of the human resistance, scattered across the lawless sectors of the galaxy. If he could reach them, if he could show them the power of the Singularity Lance, humanity might finally have a fighting chance. As the stars streaked past him in the void, Elias clenched his jaw. The chase was on, and the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy, now rested on his shoulders. The warp jump was rough. Elias Voss wasn't sure if it was because the stolen Zalrith scout vessel was barely held together or if his own nerves were betraying him. Either way, when the ship lurched back into real space, alarms blaring and hull integrity at 67%, he barely had time to breathe before his sensors picked up movement. He had arrived at the Graveyard Expanse, an asteroid field littered with the remains of countless destroyed warships. It was a place of legends, where fleets had clashed and been forgotten. But more importantly, it was the last known hideout of the Terran resistance. The Dominion thought the human rebellion had been crushed decades ago. And maybe they were right. The so-called resistance was more myth than army, a scattered group of survivors, smugglers, and old warriors too stubborn to die. But Elias wasn't here for an army. He was here for one man. ### the Ghost Admiral. A red light flashed across the control panel. Elias was being locked onto. He barely had time to react before a voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified vessel, power down and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate termination. Elias hesitated. Then, slowly, he shut down the engines. The resistance would shoot first and ask questions never. If he didn't play this right, he'd die before he even got to explain why he was here. A minute later, his ship shook as a boarding tube latched onto the airlock. The metal hissed open, and armed figures stormed in, humans, wearing mismatched armor, their weapons scavenged from a dozen different species. Their leader, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants running along his temple, stepped forward. "Who the hell are you?" Elias raised his hands. "Now or never. I have a weapon that can kill the Zalrith. Not just one ship. The whole empire." The soldiers exchanged glances. Their leader's eyes narrowed. "Talk fast. Or die slow. ### the Broken Rebellion." They dragged him to a hidden outpost deep within the asteroid field. The place was a wreck, makeshift fortifications, old tech barely functioning, scavenged supplies running low. This was what remained of the once mighty Terran resistance? In the command center, Elias finally saw him, the man he had risked everything to find. Admiral Doran Kane. Once a legend, now a ghost. The last surviving commander of Earth's fleet, the man who had fought the Zalrith for 30 years and vanished after the final battle. He looked even older than the Holovids, his face scarred, his hair gray. But the fire in his eyes hadn't died. Kane studied Elias for a long time before speaking. "You claim you can kill the Dominion. Prove it." Elias took a breath. Then, he placed a small, palm-sized device on the table, a prototype of the Singularity Lance. This can destabilize Zalrith warships at a molecular level. Once fired, the effect spreads. Their technology is based on psionic harmonics. This disrupts it, permanently. Kane's expression didn't change. "We've heard big promises before." Elias smirked. "Then let's test it. ### the first strike." Kane didn't trust Elias, but he knew one thing: humanity was dying. If there was even a chance this weapon worked, they had to take it. Hours later, they found their target, a Zalrith patrol ship on the edge of the expanse. Normally, attacking it would be suicide. But Elias wasn't using normal weapons. From the safety of a cloaked station, they aimed a modified railgun at the Zalrith vessel. Inside the payload was a microversion of the Singularity Lance. Fire. The projectile struck the Zalrith ship's shields, and passed through them like they weren't even there. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the Zalrith vessel began to unravel. Its shimmering energy fields collapsed. The hull twisted in on itself, its impossible geometry collapsing like a dying star. The Zalrith crew inside didn't even have time to react. Within moments, the mighty Dominion warship was reduced to scattered atoms drifting in the void. Silence filled the command room. One of the resistance fighters whispered, "By the void." Admiral Kane turned to Elias. For the first time in years, he smiled. "We just became a threat again." The destruction of the Zalrith patrol ship sent shockwaves through the resistance. For years, they had survived by hiding, scavenging, and running. But now, for the first time since Earth fell, they had something they hadn't dared to believe in. Hope. Admiral Doran Kane wasted no time. The resistance was small, too small to fight a full-scale war, but with the Singularity Lance, they didn't need brute force. They needed precision. "We hit them where it hurts," Kane declared, standing before the gathered remnants of humanity. "We take out their supply lines, their command ships, their biggest assets. We turn their own arrogance against them." For the first time in decades, the war was back on. The first target, the Zalrith Relay Hub. The Zalrith's strength came from their psionic network, a vast, interconnected web that allowed their warlords to communicate across the galaxy almost instantly. It was their greatest strategic advantage. If humanity was going to strike back, they had to blind the Dominion first. The target was Relay Station Theta, a massive orbital array deep in the Jurok system. It was lightly defended. After all, who would be foolish enough to attack the Zalrith? "We're about to redefine foolish," Elias muttered as he finalized the modifications to the Lance's warhead. The plan was simple: get in, fire the weapon, and escape before the Zalrith even knew what hit them. But plans, as history had proven time and time again, rarely survived first contact. The assault begins. A small strike force, consisting of old human warships and stolen alien vessels, emerged from hyperspace near the station. Elias was aboard the Iron Fang, a battered frigate that had seen more wars than most of the men crewing it. Kane himself led the attack from the Revenant, an old battlecruiser held together with scavenged parts and sheer human stubbornness. As expected, the Zalrith barely reacted at first. A few automated defenses came online, but the Dominion had grown complacent, too used to their supremacy. They didn't see the resistance as a real threat. That mistake would cost them everything. The Singularity Lance fired. The effect was immediate, like an invisible shockwave rippling through reality itself. The Zalrith relay station imploded, its psionic energy fields collapsing in an instant. A chain reaction spread through the entire network, severing the Dominion's near-instantaneous communication. For the first time in centuries, the Zalrith were deaf. But the victory came at a price. The second the relay station collapsed, something awoke. The wrath of the Dominion. Unbeknownst to Elias and the Resistance, the Zalrith weren't just arrogant, they were paranoid. The destruction of the relay triggered an automatic failsafe, sending a distress signal directly to the nearest Dominion fleet. Within minutes, reality itself tore open as multiple Zalrith warships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek, impossible forms shimmering with psionic energy. The largest of them, a Zalrith Dreadlord-class battleship, cast a shadow over the battlefield. A transmission cut through the Resistance's comms, a voice dripping with malice and barely contained fury. "Humans." The voice belonged to High Inquisitor Zorvas, one of the Zalrith's most ruthless warlords. His face appeared on the hollow screens, a gaunt, gray-skinned being with eyes like burning suns. "You have forgotten your place. Allow me to remind you." The Dominion fleet opened fire. The desperate escape. Blazing lances of psionic energy ripped through space, tearing apart one of the Resistance ships in an instant. The Resistance fleet, outgunned and outnumbered, had no choice but to run. Elias barely had time to strap in before the Iron Fang was rocked by an explosion. Sparks flew as alarms blared. The ship's pilot, a battle-hardened woman named Rika Vaughn, cursed as she jerked the controls. "Hold on to something. This is gonna get ugly." The fleet scrambled, diving into an asteroid field to escape the relentless assault. The Zalrith ships followed, their psionic weapons distorting space itself to bend around obstacles. One Resistance fighter was caught mid-maneuver, its hull imploded as if reality itself had crushed it. Elias's heart pounded. This wasn't just retaliation. This was extermination. A calculated sacrifice. On the Revenant, Kane knew they couldn't outrun the Zalrith forever. "We need a diversion," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. His second-in-command, Captain Lorna Briggs, turned to him, eyes grim. "We both know what that means." Kane exhaled slowly. "Get the crew to the escape pods. I'll handle the rest." Down in the hangar bay, Elias heard the order come through his earpiece. Kane was staying behind. "No," Elias muttered, shoving past engineers and wounded soldiers. "We need him. We can't." Briggs stopped him, gripping his arm. "This is war, Voss." Elias clenched his fists. He had built the weapon that had started this war, but now, watching his only real leader prepare to die for them, the weight of it hit him like a hammer. Kane's final transmission came through, his voice steady. "You've got the weapon, Elias. Now you need to finish the fight." The Revenant turned, charging straight at the Dominion fleet. Kane activated the ship's overloaded reactor, creating a man-made supernova. The explosion was blinding. 3 Dominion warships were obliterated in an instant. And in the chaos, the Resistance escaped. #### the price of war. When the dust settled, Elias sat alone in the darkened cockpit of the Iron Fang, staring at the empty space where the Revenant had once been. They had won a battle. But Kane was gone. And the Dominion would never underestimate humanity again. The loss of Admiral Kane hit the Resistance hard. He had been more than a leader, he had been the symbol of humanity's defiance. Now, with the Dominion hunting them down, morale was crumbling. Elias Voss sat alone in the Iron Fang's war room, staring at schematics of the Singularity Lance. It had worked, too well. They had struck a blow so severe that the Zalrith had responded with immediate, overwhelming force. And now, the full weight of the Dominion's wrath was coming for them. ### the human gamble. The Resistance had scattered after the battle, their forces retreating to deep space hideouts and abandoned outposts. But running wasn't a strategy. If they didn't strike again, they would lose whatever momentum Kane's sacrifice had given them. Rika Vaughn, the Iron Fang's pilot, leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You're thinking about doing something stupid, aren't you?" Elias didn't look up. "I'm thinking about doing something necessary." She sighed. "Same thing." Elias tapped the console, pulling up an image of a massive station orbiting a dying red star. "This is the Vault of Jorital," he said. "The Dominion's most secure research facility." "What the hell are you suggesting?" Briggs asked, narrowing her eyes. Elias exhaled. "That's where they keep their darkest secrets. If the Zalrith ever feared losing power, they'd have a contingency, a failsafe." He pointed to the holo display. "We're going to steal it. ### the heist of the century." The plan was insane. The Vault of Jorital wasn't just any station, it was a fortress, buried under layers of psionic defenses, AI-controlled sentries, and some of the most dangerous technology in the known universe. But Elias had one advantage: the Zalrith didn't think like humans. They were powerful, yes. But they were also arrogant. Their technology was based on stability, on control. They had never faced an enemy like humanity, ***, a species willing to embrace chaos to win, ***. And so, the heist began. ### infiltration. The Iron Fang dropped out of hyperspace just outside the Jorital system. Elias, Rika, and a small strike team boarded a stolen Dominion transport ship, using forged access codes to slip through the first layer of security. Inside the station, the alien grandeur of the Dominion was overwhelming: massive hallways carved from obsidian-like stone, psionic energy humming through the walls, and Zalrith overseers floating through the corridors like spectral gods. The team moved quickly, using jamming devices to block surveillance and neutralizing guards before they even realized they were under attack. Elias's target was a data vault deep within the facility. If there was anything the Zalrith feared, it would be there. ### the Forbidden Archive. They reached the vault without raising alarms, until Elias hacked the door. The second it opened, the entire station screamed. A psionic shockwave surged through the facility, alerting every Zalrith within light years. "We're out of time!" Rika shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. He ran to the data core and activated the download. Lines of alien text streamed across the holoscreen, and then he saw it. A file, buried under layers of encryption, with a name that sent a chill down his spine. Project Godsbane. Elias had no idea what it was. But he knew one thing, ***, the Zalrith were terrified of it, ***. We have what we need. Move. ### the escape. Alarms blared. Zalrith sentinels, massive, floating war machines, descended from the ceiling, energy lances crackling with power. The team sprinted through the corridors, ducking behind pillars as plasma fire tore through the walls. Rika took down 2 sentinels with well-placed explosive charges, while Briggs led the team through the chaos, keeping them moving. They made it back to the stolen transport, but the docking bay was sealed. "I can override it, but I need a minute," Elias yelled, hacking into the controls. "We don't have a minute," Rika snapped, firing at incoming Zalrith guards. Then, from the other side of the bay, a deep, resonating voice echoed through the chamber. "I admire your audacity." A Zalrith warlord floated forward, his psionic aura distorting the air around him. His golden armor pulsed with energy, and his eyes, ***, burning pits of endless knowledge ***, locked onto Elias. "You do not understand what you have stolen." Elias gritted his teeth. "I don't need to." He slammed the override, and the docking bay doors blasted open. The resistance team jumped into the transport as the ship's engines roared to life. Plasma fire rained down around them as the warlord raised a hand, ***, space itself seemed to warp ***, pulling the ship backward. But Elias had prepared for this. He hit a final command, detonating a psionic feedback bomb. The warlord screamed as his own energy imploded around him. The resistance ship blasted out of the station just as an explosion rocked the facility behind them. ### the truth about Godsbane. Back on the Iron Fang, Elias finally opened the stolen file. What he saw made his blood run cold. Oh, shit. The Zalrith hadn't created Godsbane. They had found it. Buried in the deep black of the universe, there was something older than the Dominion, something the Zalrith feared so much that they had locked it away, never daring to use it. But now, Elias had the key. Rika leaned over, eyes wide. "What the hell did we just steal?" Elias exhaled. A way to end the war. Or something much worse. The Iron Fang was running dark, drifting through a nebula to avoid detection. Every member of the crew was on edge, knowing the Dominion would stop at nothing to retrieve what they had stolen. Elias Voss sat in the war room, staring at the decrypted files from Project Godsbane. The deeper he read, the more his gut twisted. The Zalrith had feared this weapon for thousands of years. Not because it could destroy them, but because it could unmake everything. ### the truth behind the weapon. The data logs described a construct hidden beyond known space, something the Zalrith had unearthed in the ruins of an even older civilization. A machine that could rewrite reality itself. "Godsbane isn't a weapon," Elias muttered. "It's a failsafe." Briggs leaned over his shoulder, eyes narrowed. "For what?" Elias scrolled further, and then he found it, a section labeled Event Horizon. It described something buried at the edge of the universe, beyond the reaches of any known species. A force that defied time, physics, and even psionics. The Zalrith Dominion had not conquered the galaxy through sheer power alone. They had sealed something away, something that once challenged their rule. The Singularity Lance was just the beginning, Elias whispered. The real weapon isn't the lance. It's whatever the hell they locked up. Rika crossed her arms, uneasy. And you want to go looking for it? Elias exhaled. If the Dominion is afraid of it, then it might be our only chance to end them. #### the hunt for the lost coordinates. The stolen data hinted at the weapon's location, but the exact coordinates had been fragmented, intentionally buried across multiple Zalrith archives. They were so afraid of it, they made sure no single source could lead to it, Elias muttered. They needed to recover the missing pieces, and fast. Because the Zalrith were already coming for them. #### the Empire strikes back, again. A proximity alarm blared. The Iron Fang sensors picked up an approaching fleet, Zalrith warships, emerging from hyperspace. They had been found. Briggs slammed the intercom. All hands, battle stations. The Resistance had no choice. The Iron Fang and the few ships that had regrouped with them had to fight. Zalrith cruisers opened fire, psionic lances tearing through space. One of the Resistance destroyers was ripped apart instantly. We can't outgun them. Rika shouted. Elias knew she was right. They needed to run. But then, something unexpected happened. A new fleet emerged from hyperspace, **** human ships ****, ones that shouldn't have even existed. #### the return of the Forgotten Fleet. The comms crackled, and a gruff voice came through. Looks like you kids need a hand. Elias's breath caught. He knew that voice. It belonged to Commander Thorn, leader of the Phantom Armada, a hidden fleet of old Terran warships that had vanished decades ago, believed to be lost in deep space. They had stayed hidden, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, with the Singularity Lance and God's Bane in play, they had returned. We heard someone finally found a way to kill the bastards, Thorn said. Figured we'd like to be part of that. #### the battle turns. With the Phantom Armada joining the fight, the battle shifted. Zalrith ships, used to overwhelming their enemies, found themselves outflanked. One of the Phantom cruisers detonated its reactor, creating a shockwave that tore through a Zalrith battleship. The Iron Fang broke through the enemy lines and jumped to hyperspace, escaping just before the Dominion could regroup. For the first time, humanity had allies. And now, with the Phantom Armada backing them, they had a real chance. #### the final piece of the puzzle. After the battle, Elias and Thorn met in the war room. The old commander looked at the stolen data and grunted. God's Bane, huh? He ran a hand through his graying beard. I heard whispers about this, long ago. Thought it was just a myth. Elias shook his head. It's real. And if we get the last piece of the coordinates, we can find it. Thorn nodded. Then we better move fast. Because I guarantee you, the Zalrith ain't gonna sit back and let us take it. Elias turned back to the holodisplay. The final piece of the puzzle was waiting. And whatever God's Bane was, they were going to wake it up. The stolen Zalrith files had revealed only fragments of the truth about God's Bane. Now, Elias Voss and the Resistance had one last mission before they could claim the ultimate weapon. The final set of coordinates lay deep inside a Zalrith psionic archive, an ancient vault world where the Dominion stored their most classified knowledge. If they were going to find God's Bane, they would have to break into the most well-guarded library in the universe. And they were running out of time. #### the final heist. The Phantom Armada, now officially allied with the Resistance, provided the perfect distraction, a fleet-wide assault against Zalrith supply lines to draw attention away from the vault world of Zur-Enal-Keth. While the Dominion scrambled to defend their trade routes, the Iron Fang and a small team of operatives slipped into the system, posing as a Zalrith patrol ship. Elias, Rika, and Briggs led the infiltration. The station's architecture was like a cathedral, ***, towering spires of dark obsidian ***, psionic energy humming through the walls like a living thing. This place isn't just a vault, Elias murmured, staring at the glyphs carved into the walls. It's a tomb. #### the truth about God's Bane. After bypassing layers of security, they reached the central data core. Elias hacked into the system, searching for the missing coordinates. And that's when he found the final piece of the puzzle. God's Bane wasn't a weapon. It was a prison. Millennia ago, before the Zalrith ruled the galaxy, they had fought against something else, an ancient, godlike entity that defied all laws of physics and psionics. The Dominion had been on the brink of annihilation until they created the ultimate containment field, a singularity cage powered by an entire dying star. They didn't defeat it, Elias whispered. They locked it away. Rika paled. And you want to set it free? Elias clenched his fists. If it can destroy the Zalrith, then yes. ### the betrayal. Before they could leave, alarms screamed through the station. They had been found. The vault doors slammed shut, and the air crackled as High Inquisitor Zorvas materialized before them. His psionic aura was so powerful that the walls bent around him. Fools, Zorvas hissed. You seek to awaken that which even we fear? You think you can control it? The Inquisitor raised a hand, and suddenly Elias couldn't breathe. A crushing force wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. You do not understand what you are tampering with, Zorvas continued. God's Bane is not your salvation. It is your end. Then, before Zorvas could strike the final blow, Briggs opened fire. A well-placed plasma shot struck a psionic node in the ceiling, causing the entire chamber to collapse. The resistance team ran, barely making it back to their ship as Zalrith guards stormed the corridors. The Iron Fang blasted off just as the entire vault imploded, destroying centuries of Zalrith knowledge. But it didn't matter. Elias had the final coordinates. They knew where God's Bane was. ### the countdown begins. Back aboard the fleet, Elias and Commander Thorne studied the star charts. It's here, Elias said, pointing to a section of space so remote it wasn't even on standard maps. A dead zone, untouched for millennia. Thorne exhaled. No ships. No planets. Nothing. Exactly, Elias muttered. Because the Zalrith wanted it erased from existence. Briggs spoke up. If we go there, we're committed. No turning back. Elias nodded. This is it. We wake God's Bane, or we die trying. Silence hung over the room. Then Thorne cracked his knuckles. Well, I didn't come out of retirement to play it safe. He turned to the fleet, activating the intercom. All ships, prepare for jump. We're going to wake up a god. ### the Zalrith's final move. But before they could leave, a final transmission came through. Zorvas appeared on the holoscreen, grinning. You truly do not understand, do you? We are not coming to stop you. We are coming to beg you not to do this. Elias's blood ran cold. What the hell had they just unleashed? The fleet tore through hyperspace, the Iron Fang leading the charge toward the final coordinates. Every ship in the Resistance and Phantom Armada knew, ***, this was the endgame ***. The Zalrith Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries, crushing countless civilizations under their psionic dominion. But Elias Voss was about to unleash something even they feared. Something older than empires. Something that should have stayed buried. ### arrival at the dead zone. The fleet emerged into a sector of space unlike anything they had ever seen. There were no stars. No planets. No debris. Just absolute blackness stretching endlessly. This isn't normal, Rika murmured. It's like space itself was erased. Elias checked the coordinates. They were exactly where the Zalrith files had led them. But there was nothing here. No station. No prison. No weapon. Just an impossible void. Maybe the Zalrith tricked us, Briggs muttered. Elias shook his head. He could feel something. A pressure. A presence. He turned to the fleet. Activate deep space scans. Whatever's here, it's hiding. #### revealing the unthinkable. The ships activated their long-range scanners, pulsing energy into the void, ****, and space itself seemed to shudder, ****. And then, suddenly, the blackness moved. Something colossal began to materialize. An object so large it made planets look insignificant. A structure woven from the very fabric of space-time, hidden outside normal reality. A station? A weapon? No. A tomb. The prison of God's bane. #### The warden's warning. The fleet approached cautiously, scanning the structure. Then, an ancient voice echoed across every comm channel. It wasn't Zalrith. It wasn't human. It was something beyond both. You should not have come. Elias's blood ran cold. Who is this? The voice seemed to laugh, though there was no humor in it. I was the warden. Before time forgot me. And you, foolish child, are about to unleash the end. #### breaking the seal. Before Elias could respond, proximity alarms shrieked. The Zalrith Dominion fleet had arrived, hundreds of warships, their golden hulls reflecting what little light remained in this cursed space. And at their head was High Inquisitor Zorvas. Stop! Zorvas's voice thundered across the comms. You do not understand what you are about to do. Elias clenched his fists. You're afraid. That's the only reason I need to do this. He turned to his crew. Prepare the Singularity Lance. We're cracking this thing open. #### The battle for the apocalypse. The Zalrith opened fire. Energy lances and psionic storms tore through the Resistance fleet, sending ships into chaotic spirals. The Phantom Armada returned fire, detonating Dominion cruisers with precise, brutal strikes. And through it all, the Iron Fang pressed forward, charging the Singularity Lance. 10 seconds to firing sequence. Briggs shouted. Hold them off. Elias yelled, gripping his chair as the ship shook violently from incoming fire. A Zalrith dreadnought moved to intercept. Then, Commander Thorne's ship rammed straight into it, detonating his own reactor in a blinding explosion. For humanity. Thorne's last words echoed through the comms. The Singularity Lance fired. #### The prison opens. The weapon struck the colossal structure. And space broke. The entire battlefield collapsed inward, like a hole had been punched through reality itself. The prison of God's bane shattered, and from within, something awoke. A force so massive that it could not be perceived by mortal minds. A shape that flickered between forms, as if reality itself was unsure what it was looking at. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a god. It was something beyond both. And it was angry. #### The birth of the end. The Zalrith fleet immediately turned to flee. Fools, Zorvas whispered. You have doomed us all. The entity moved, and entire warships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but erased, as if they had never been there. The battlefield became a massacre. Zalrith ships, Resistance fighters, Phantom Armada vessels, all caught in the wake of something that did not belong in this universe. Elias stared at the thing they had unleashed. For the first time, he felt fear. #### The final choice. The warden's voice returned, solemn and distant. Now you see. There was never a weapon. Only judgment. Elias turned to his crew. We have to stop it. Rika's eyes widened. Are you serious? We spent everything trying to get here. And we were wrong. Elias shouted. This isn't our salvation. It's something worse. Something that doesn't care about humanity or the Zalrith. It will erase everything. Briggs's face was pale. Then how the hell do we stop it? Elias turned back to the wreckage of the Zalrith fleet. And then, he made a choice. We use the Singularity Lance again. On what? Rika asked. Elias took a deep breath. On it. ####the final strike. The Iron Fang charged its weapon one last time. The entity turned, as if finally noticing them. A voice that wasn't a voice spoke in their minds. You are insignificant. You are nothing. Elias gritted his teeth. Then let's see what nothing can do. The Singularity Lance fired. A black hole erupted, not just in space, but in existence itself, a wound in the universe, dragging the entity back into the abyss from which it came. It fought. It raged. But in the end, even it could not escape the pull of oblivion. With a final, shuddering cry, God's bane was sealed once more. #### the aftermath. The battle was over. The Zalrith Dominion was shattered, its fleet decimated, its leaders broken. Without their psionic supremacy, their empire collapsed overnight. Humanity, once on the brink of extinction, now rose from the ashes. But Elias Voss knew the truth. This was not a victory. Because something out there, something older than empires, something beyond comprehension, had seen them. And one day, it might return. Rika stood beside him, staring into the dark void. Do you think we really won? Elias exhaled. I think we survived. For now.